Now, if you squint at DHCP, you might notice that it basically is the same thing as the ARP protocol that we saw earlier. And in fact, this slide is mostly copied from what we talked about when we talked about ARP. So once again, we still have the same fundamental flaw that occurs at lower layers. Alice doesn't have any sort of verification on the response. When you're operating at these lower layers of abstraction, there is no built-in cryptography, so Alice doesn't have any way to verify whether or not the response came from a DHCP server or an attacker pretending to be a DHCP server. Anybody can claim to have a configuration, and because Alice just joined for the first time, she doesn't know who to trust. Now, just like before, there are some conditions for the attacker for their attack to succeed. So once again, Mallory has to be in the same local network so that she can hear the broadcast and then send an offer in response. And as before, if Mallory sends an offer, she needs to win the race against the legitimate offer. So if two offers arrive, Mallory has to make sure her offer arrives first. And the reason is because Alice usually only expects one response, so she usually goes with the first one. In that case, it's in Mallory's best interest to have her response show up first. So once again, we have the same preconditions and the same flaws as ARP. And just like in ARP, DHCP allows Mallory to upgrade herself from an on-path attacker to a man-in-the-middle attacker. So before DHCP, Mallory is on path. She can read the messages that are being sent, but she cannot modify them. But after the DHCP attack succeeds, Mallory becomes a full man-in-the-middle attacker. And why is that? Because Mallory can, for example, claim that she is the router. So remember that one of the configuration details that's provided is where the router is. So if Mallory replied, she could say, I'm the router, talk to me if you have packets for the outside world. And now, anytime Alice sends an external packet to the rest of the internet, instead of sending it to the actual router, she sends it to Mallory instead, who now has the ability to modify the message before sending it to its destination. This makes Mallory a full man-in-the-middle attacker. So once again, Mallory has given herself the ability to upgrade from on-path to man-in-the-middle. So once again, if you squint at ARP and DHCP, the attack is basically the same. In both cases, the attacker is spoofing. They are pretending to be someone they're not. In ARP spoofing, the attacker pretends to be Bob, even though she's not. And in the DHCP spoofing attack, the attacker pretends to be the DHCP server, even though they're not. And in both cases, a race condition exists where the attacker's response has to get there first. And in both cases, the attacker can upgrade themselves from an on-path attacker to a man-in-the-middle attacker. And in both cases, the vulnerabilities are, one, that the protocols are broadcast, which means that Alice has to shout for help and ask everybody, and that includes the attacker, so the attacker can see the request and potentially send a malicious response. And the second problem, and why we don't really have any good defenses, is that when we're working at these low levels, and especially with DHCP, where the attacker is joining the network for the first time, or the user is joining the network for the first time, there is no trust anchor. DHCP is the first thing you do when you join, and at that point, when you first move into your apartment or you first join the network, there is no way for you to know who to trust, so it's hard to verify that these responses are legitimate. So in real life, these are attacks that don't really have very robust defenses, and the way that we'll defend against them is rely on some higher layer protocols that are coming later. So stay tuned for that. So once again, DHCP in particular is really hard to defend against because when you first connect to the network, there isn't any sort of implicit trust. And so with both ARP and DHCP, some of the defenses that we'll see occur at higher layers instead.